Get your dirty hands off that weapon! Commander Rick Morrison's voice exploded across the Navy SEAL armory like a flashbang grenade, his massive frame filling the doorway as he spotted the 26-year-old woman kneeling beside the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. The blonde maintenance worker didn't even flinch. She simply continued her methodical cleaning motion, running the cloth along the massive barrel with surgical precision that seemed almost hypnotic. Madison Parker looked up slowly, her hazel eyes meeting the furious gaze of the 6'4" SEAL commander who towered over her like a mountain of tactical gear and barely contained rage. Around them, 50 elite operators had stopped their weapon maintenance to watch what was clearly about to become a spectacle none of them would forget. "Ma'am, you are not authorized to handle classified sniper systems," Morrison growled, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. "This is a restricted area for qualified personnel only." Madison's hands, small, delicate hands that looked like they belonged arranging flowers rather than field-stripping military weapons, never stopped moving. She completed disassembling the Barrett's bolt carrier group in 12 seconds flat, each component laid out in perfect symmetry on the cleaning mat. The armory fell silent except for the distant sound of helicopter rotors and ocean waves crashing against Coronado Beach. But in the next 20 minutes, everything was about to change in ways that would leave these elite warriors questioning everything they thought they knew about strength, skill, and the deadly secrets hidden in plain sight. If you're already feeling the tension build around Madison and those dismissive SEALs, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more stories where the underestimated rise to shock the world. And for those who truly support these powerful tales of hidden strength, the thanks button below means everything. It helps me continue bringing you stories that remind us never to judge by appearances. Now, let's see what Madison does when 50 elite warriors are staring her down. The Coronado Naval Amphibious Base had been Madison Parker's workplace for 8 months, but she had never felt more like an outsider than she did at 0730 hours that Tuesday morning. Her maintenance supervisor had assigned her to the SEAL Team 3 Armory for routine cleaning and inspection, a job that should have taken 2 hours in the empty facility. What she hadn't counted on was the team returning early from their morning physical training session. Madison stood slowly, her 5'4" frame dwarfed by Commander Morrison's imposing presence. Her light brown hair, streaked with natural blonde highlights from the California sun, was pulled back in a simple ponytail that made her look younger than her 26 years. She wore standard base maintenance coveralls, clean but faded from countless washings, and carried a toolkit that had seen better days. "Sir, I was assigned to perform scheduled maintenance on all weapon systems in this facility," Madison said quietly, her voice steady despite the growing crowd of SEALs gathering around them. "Work Order 774-Alpha, issued by Maintenance Control." Morrison snatched the clipboard from her hands, his massive fingers making the standard Navy forms look tiny. At 38 years old, he was a 15-year veteran who had built his reputation on intimidation as much as tactical skill. His crew cut was going gray at the temples, and his face bore the weathered look of countless deployments, but it was his eyes that betrayed his true nature, cold, calculating, and dismissive of anyone he perceived as weak. "I don't care what some desk jockey in maintenance thinks," Morrison snapped, tossing the clipboard onto the nearest weapon rack where it clattered against an M4 carbine. "Nobody touches our gear without direct authorization from me, especially not some civilian contractor who probably can't tell the difference between a safety and a trigger." The SEALs around them chuckled, but Madison noticed something interesting in their reactions. While the younger operators laughed openly, some of the veterans were watching her more carefully. Master Chief Pat Kelly, a 22-year Navy veteran with arms like tree trunks and a face carved from granite, had positioned himself where he could observe both the confrontation and Madison's reactions. "Tank, escort Miss Maintenance out of here before she breaks something expensive," Morrison ordered, jerking his thumb toward Petty Officer Marcus Williams. At 6'2" and built like his nickname suggested, Tank stepped forward with the predatory grin of someone who enjoyed intimidating people smaller than himself. "Come on, sweetheart," Tank said, reaching for Madison's arm. "Time to go back to mopping floors and leave the real work to the professionals." Madison stepped back smoothly, avoiding his grasp without making it look confrontational. "I understand your concern, sir," she said to Morrison, never taking her eyes off the commander. "But I need to complete this maintenance schedule, or the weapons won't pass their monthly inspection." "Monthly inspection?" Seaman Danny Rodriguez called out from the back of the group, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What are you going to inspect? Whether we wipe them down good enough? Maybe check if we missed any dust bunnies?" The crowd erupted in laughter, but Madison remained calm. She knelt back down beside the Barrett, her movements deliberate and controlled. Without looking up, she began reassembling the bolt carrier group she had disassembled moments earlier. The Barrett M82A1 has a maximum effective range of 1,800 meters against personnel targets, she said conversationally, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. But with proper ammunition selection and environmental compensation, effective range can be extended to 2,500 meters or beyond. The laughter died away. Several SEALs exchanged glances. That wasn't information you picked up from a Wikipedia article. Madison continued working, her voice steady and factual. This particular weapon shows wear patterns consistent with approximately 2,000 rounds fired. The muzzle brake has been modified for reduced flash signature, and someone has installed a custom trigger group that reduces pull weight to approximately 3.5 pounds. Lieutenant Jake Torres, at 24, the youngest officer in the team, found himself leaning forward to get a better look. Madison was right. The trigger had been modified, something only someone with extensive weapons knowledge would notice. And the round count estimate was eerily accurate. He had personally supervised the last barrel replacement after exactly 2,037 rounds. "How do you know that?" Jake asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Madison finished reassembling the weapon and looked up at him. For just a moment, her carefully maintained composure seemed to slip, revealing something harder underneath. "I read the maintenance logs. It was a lie, and somehow Jake knew it. Maintenance logs didn't contain that level of detail. But before he could press further, Morrison stepped between them. "I've had enough of this nonsense," the commander growled. "Tank, Rodriguez, escort Miss Know-It-All out of my armory, now." But as Tank reached for Madison's arm again, Master Chief Kelly spoke up for the first time. "Belay that order." The armory went dead quiet. In the SEAL teams, Master Chiefs were gods, and even commanders thought twice before overriding them. Kelly had served in every major conflict of the past 2 decades, and his reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his ability to spot potential in the most unlikely places. "With respect, Master Chief," Morrison said carefully, "this is a security issue. Civilian personnel don't have the clearance to handle our weapons." Kelly nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Madison. "You're absolutely right, Commander. Which makes me wonder how she knew about the trigger modification that was done 3 months ago by our gunsmith, or why she can identify round count by looking at wear patterns that most of our own people would miss." Madison carefully applied specialized joint support equipment around her wrists. Advanced biomechanical stabilizers originally developed for NASA astronauts, but now adapted for precision marksmen dealing with repetitive stress injuries. The prescription anti-inflammatory medication she took each morning cost more per dose than most people's weekly salary, but it was essential for maintaining the fine motor control required for detailed weapons maintenance in high-stress military environments. The devices looked like simple wrist braces to the casual observer, but Kelly noticed the carbon fiber construction and the almost imperceptible servo mechanisms that provided micro-adjustments to hand positioning. Equipment like that didn't come from the base medical facility. "Maybe we should test this knowledge," Kelly suggested, his voice deceptively casual. "If Miss Parker here knows so much about our weapons, let's see if she can put her money where her mouth is." Morrison's face flushed red. He clearly didn't like being challenged in front of his team, but he also couldn't directly contradict the Master Chief without causing a bigger scene. "What did you have in mind?" "Simple weapons knowledge test," Kelly said, walking over to a locked cabinet and withdrawing an M4A1 carbine. "Standard SEAL qualification, field strip, clean, and reassemble, blindfolded." The suggestion drew excited murmurs from the crowd. Even for experienced operators, performing a complete weapons breakdown without sight was challenging. For a civilian maintenance worker, it should be impossible. Madison stood slowly, looking from Kelly to Morrison and back again. "Sir, I'm not sure that's necessary. I was just trying to do my job." "Scared?" Rodriguez called out. "Don't worry, honey. We won't laugh too hard when you fail." Something flickered across Madison's face. Not fear, but something else. Something that made Jake Torres take an involuntary step backward. For just an instant, the maintenance worker facade had dropped, revealing someone else entirely, someone dangerous. "Fine," Madison said quietly. "But let's make it interesting." Morrison grinned triumphantly. "Oh, this should be good. What do you have in mind?" "If I complete the test, you let me finish my work without interference," Madison said. "If I fail, I'll request reassignment and never set foot in your armory again." "Deal," Morrison said immediately, clearly believing he was about to humiliate the uppity maintenance worker in front of his entire team. Master Chief Kelly handed Madison the M4, along with a cleaning kit and a blindfold that looked like it had been borrowed from the base medical facility. "Standard rules apply: complete disassembly, inspection, cleaning, and reassembly. You have 15 minutes. Madison accepted the blindfold, but didn't put it on immediately. Instead, she looked around the circle of SEALs, her gaze lingering on each face as if memorizing them. When her eyes met Morrison's, there was something in them that made the big commander shift uncomfortably. 15 minutes seems excessive, Madison said, securing the blindfold over her eyes. Let's make it 5. The armory erupted in laughter and catcalls, but Madison had already begun. Her hands moved across the M4 with fluid precision, finding and activating the takedown pins as if she could see through the blindfold. The upper and lower receivers separated with practiced efficiency. Jake Torres found himself checking his watch as Madison's hands danced across the weapon components. Bolt carrier group removed and separated. Charging handle extracted. Buffer and buffer spring from the stock. Each piece was cleaned with methodical precision and placed in exact positions on the cleaning mat. 3 minutes and 37 seconds. The laughter had died away completely. Even Morrison was staring as Madison began reassembly, her movements flowing like water. No fumbling, no hesitation, no second guessing. Each component slotted into place with mechanical precision. 4 minutes and 18 seconds total. Madison removed the blindfold and set the completed M4 on the cleaning mat. Function check. Master Chief Kelly picked up the weapon and performed a complete operational check. Trigger response, safety functionality, bolt operation, everything was perfect. More than perfect, actually. The weapon was cleaner than it had been in months. "Holy cow," someone whispered from the back of the crowd. Madison began collecting her cleaning supplies, her movements once again those of a simple maintenance worker. But something had changed in the room's dynamic. The SEALs were no longer looking at her with amusement or condescension. There was uncertainty now, and in some cases, a growing respect. "Where did you learn to do that?" Jake Torres asked, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Madison paused, her back still turned to the group. "I read the manual." Another lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Manuals didn't teach the kind of muscle memory they had just witnessed. That level of proficiency took thousands of hours of practice under expert instruction. Morrison stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Being shown up by a civilian contractor in front of his entire team was not something his ego could handle gracefully. Neat trick, but knowing how to take apart a rifle doesn't make you a warrior. "I never claimed to be a warrior," Madison replied evenly, finally turning to face him. "I'm maintenance personnel. I fix things and keep them running." "Is that right?" Morrison's voice took on a dangerous edge. "Because I'm starting to wonder if you're really just maintenance personnel. Maybe you're something else entirely." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Several SEALs shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the implication. In the post-9/11 military, security concerns were paramount, and anyone with unexplained skills was automatically suspect. "Sir, I think you're overreacting," Jake Torres said carefully. "She's just good with weapons. Maybe she's prior service." "Are you prior service?" Morrison asked Madison directly, his voice demanding an immediate answer. Madison met his gaze steadily. "No, sir. I've been a civilian my entire life." It was technically true, but the way she said it made Jake Torres frown. There was something in her phrasing, a precision that suggested careful word choice rather than straightforward honesty. "Then explain how a civilian learns to field strip an M4 in under 5 minutes blindfolded," Morrison pressed. "Explain how you know modifications that aren't documented in any manual. Explain why you handle weapons like someone who's been doing it professionally for years." Madison was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see internal conflict playing out across her features. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Some of us had different childhoods than others. Before Morrison could respond, Chief Warrant Officer Lisa Thompson pushed through the crowd. As one of only 3 female SEALs in the entire Navy, Lisa had fought tooth and claw for every bit of respect she had earned. She wasn't about to let some mysterious maintenance worker steal her spotlight. "This is ridiculous," Lisa announced, her voice sharp with professional jealousy. "So she can clean a rifle quickly. My grandmother could probably do the same thing with enough practice. It doesn't mean anything." Madison turned to look at Lisa, and for a moment, the two women sized each other up. Lisa was taller, more muscular, and carried herself with the aggressive confidence of someone who had proven herself in the world's most exclusive military unit. Madison, by contrast, looked almost fragile in her faded coveralls. "You're right," Madison said finally. "It doesn't mean anything. I should go." But as she bent to collect her toolkit, Master Chief Kelly spoke again. "Actually, I don't think you should go anywhere yet." Everyone turned to look at the Master Chief, whose weathered face showed the first hint of genuine interest it had displayed all morning. "You see, Miss Parker, I've been in this business for 22 years. I've seen every type of operator, contractor, and wannabe who's ever walked through these doors. And in all that time, I've never seen anyone handle weapons the way you just did." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The speed was impressive, sure, but it was the technique that caught my attention. The way you positioned your hands, the order of operations, even the way you cleaned the components. That's not self-taught. That's professional instruction from someone who knew exactly what they were doing." Madison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I had a good teacher." "I'll bet you did," Kelly said, his voice thoughtful. "The question is, who teaches civilian maintenance workers advanced weapons techniques that most of our own people don't know?" The armory had grown so quiet that the only sounds were the distant hum of ventilation systems and the muffled roar of jet engines from the nearby airfield. Every SEAL in the room was watching Madison, waiting for her answer. Watching Madison endure this level of disrespect makes you wonder, have you ever been completely underestimated based on how you look? Drop your story in the comments below, because I read every single one. Meanwhile, Madison is about to do something that will leave everyone speechless. Instead of answering Kelly's question directly, Madison did something unexpected. She walked over to the weapons rack and selected an M24 sniper weapon system, the standard long-range rifle used by Navy Special Operations units. The weapon was significantly more complex than the M4, with a precise trigger mechanism and specialized optics that required expert knowledge to operate effectively. "If you want to test my knowledge," Madison said quietly, "let's do it properly." She began disassembling the M24 with the same fluid precision she had shown with the Barrett, but this time, she began speaking as she worked, her voice taking on an instructional tone that several of the SEALs found disturbingly familiar. "The M24 SWS is based on the Remington 700 action, but modified for military specifications," she said, her hands moving without conscious thought. "Standard barrel length is 24 inches, chambered in 7.62 NATO. Effective range against personnel targets is 800 meters, but in skilled hands, first-round hits are achievable out to 1,000 meters or beyond." Jake Torres found himself leaning forward, captivated by the casual way Madison discussed technical specifications that most people would need reference manuals to recall. But it was her hands that really caught his attention. The way she handled each component with reverence, as if the weapon were a living thing that demanded respect. "Muzzle velocity with M118 special ball ammunition is approximately 2,550 feet per second, Madison continued, removing the bolt and beginning to clean the firing mechanism. "But for precision work, you want M118 LR, long range, which maintains supersonic velocity out to 900 meters and provides superior accuracy at extended range." Morrison was growing increasingly agitated as Madison's lecture continued. Not only was she showing up his team's supposed expertise, but she was doing it with an air of casual competence that suggested this level of knowledge was routine for her. "Enough," Morrison snapped. "I don't care if you memorized every technical manual in the Navy inventory. Knowing specifications and actually using a weapon are completely different things." Madison paused in her cleaning, looking up at Morrison with those deceptively calm hazel eyes. "Is that your professional opinion, sir?" The question was asked politely, but there was an undertone that made several SEALs step back involuntarily. It was the tone of someone who had been questioned before by people who later regretted their skepticism. "It's common sense," Morrison replied, his voice rising. "You can quote numbers all day long, but it doesn't mean you could hit the broadside of a barn with that rifle." "Probably not," Madison agreed, reassembling the M24 with practiced efficiency. "Barns are notoriously difficult targets, too much wind drift at close range." The comment drew a few chuckles from the crowd, but Morrison wasn't amused. "You think this is funny?" "No, sir," Madison replied, completing her reassembly and conducting a function check with professional thoroughness. "I think it's educational." Master Chief Kelly stepped forward, his tactical mind already working through the implications of what he was witnessing. "Miss Parker, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Have you ever fired a sniper rifle in anger?" The question hit the armory like a physical blow. Firing in anger was military terminology for combat shooting, using a weapon against enemy targets in actual warfare. It wasn't a question you asked lightly, and it wasn't one that was usually answered by civilian maintenance personnel. Madison set the M24 down carefully, her movements suddenly very controlled. When she looked up, her expression had changed subtly, showing glimpses of something harder beneath the surface. "Master Chief, with respect, my employment history isn't relevant to my current duties." "I didn't ask about your employment history," Kelly pressed. "I asked a specific question about combat experience." The two stared at each other for a long moment, and Jake Torres had the distinct impression that an entire conversation was taking place in that silence. Kelly was probing, testing, looking for cracks in Madison's carefully maintained facade, and Madison was deciding how much truth she could reveal without compromising whatever secrets she was carrying. Finally, Madison spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've fired many weapons in many situations, Master Chief. Some of those situations were more serious than others." It wasn't really an answer, but it was enough to confirm Kelly's growing suspicions. He had served with enough operators over the years to recognize the careful non-denial that suggested classified history. Morrison, however, was less subtle in his analysis. "More serious situations? Like what? Hunting deer? Shooting at paper targets? I'm getting tired of your cryptic responses." "Commander," Jake Torres interjected, "maybe we should—" "Stay out of this, Torres," Morrison snapped. "I'm dealing with a potential security breach here." The accusation seemed to flip a switch in Madison. Her posture straightened, and when she spoke, her voice carried a new edge. "Security breach? Sir, I'm a maintenance contractor with a valid clearance who was assigned to perform routine work. I haven't accessed any classified information or violated any protocols." "Haven't you?" Morrison stepped closer, using his size to try to intimidate her. "You seem to know an awful lot about weapon specifications that aren't in the public domain. You handle military equipment like you've been doing it professionally for years. And now you're dodging questions about your background." During the precision weapons examination, Madison utilized advanced diagnostic equipment, including military-grade testing devices, with computerized analysis capabilities and specialized measurement tools designed for extreme accuracy assessment. The professional quality instruments she employed featured precision calibration technology that maintained accuracy standards within thousandths of an inch, providing the kind of detailed weapon performance analysis that cost more than most people's annual salary, but remained essential for maintaining the operational readiness of critical sniper systems in high-stakes military environments. The diagnostic equipment in her kit was far more sophisticated than standard maintenance tools, something that Master Chief Kelly noticed immediately. The digital calipers, bore measurement devices, and computerized testing equipment were the kind of precision instruments used by military armorers and weapons specialists, not routine maintenance personnel. "Those are interesting tools you have there," Kelly observed, nodding toward Madison's kit. "Very precise, very expensive. Not standard issue for base maintenance." Madison glanced down at her equipment, realizing she had revealed more than intended. "I take pride in doing quality work." "I'll bet you do," Kelly said thoughtfully. "Question is, where does a civilian contractor learn to use equipment like that?" Before Madison could answer, Seaman Rodriguez decided to escalate the confrontation. "Maybe she's not really civilian maintenance," he called out from the back of the crowd. "Maybe she's some kind of government spook keeping tabs on us." The suggestion drew nervous laughter from some of the younger SEALs, but the veterans weren't laughing. In their world, Surveillance and security concerns were very real, and Rodriguez's joke touched on genuine paranoia about outside oversight. "That's enough," Master Chief Kelly said sharply, but the damage was already done. Morrison seized on Rodriguez's comment like a lifeline. "You know what? Rodriguez might be onto something," Morrison said, his voice taking on a dangerous tone. "Think about it. Mysterious background, unexplained skills, equipment that doesn't match her supposed job description. Maybe Miss Parker here isn't who she claims to be." Madison remained calm in the face of the escalating accusations, but Jake Torres could see tension building in her shoulders. She was preparing for something, fight or flight. He couldn't tell which. "Sir," Jake said carefully, "I think you might be overreacting. There could be perfectly innocent explanations for—" "Could there?" Morrison cut him off. "Or maybe we've got a problem on our hands. Maybe we need to call this into base security and let them sort it out." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Being reported to base security as a potential security risk could end Madison's career and result in a lengthy, invasive investigation. It was a serious escalation, and everyone in the room knew it. Madison looked around the circle of SEALs, seeing suspicion where moments before there had been grudging respect. She seemed to be weighing her options, calculating risks and potential outcomes. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the pressure. "Commander, if you want to call base security, that's your prerogative. But before you do, maybe you should consider the possibility that your assumptions are wrong." "My assumptions?" Morrison's voice rose. "Lady, I've been in this business for 15 years. I know suspicious when I see it." "Do you?" Madison asked quietly. "Because what you see as suspicious, I see as competence. What you interpret as deception, I call privacy. And what you perceive as a threat might actually be an asset you're too proud to recognize." The words were spoken softly, but they hit Morrison like a slap. Several SEALs shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the challenge implicit in Madison's response. Morrison stepped even closer, his massive frame looming over Madison's smaller figure. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "I'm questioning your assumptions," Madison replied, not backing down despite the obvious size difference. "You assumed I couldn't handle weapons because I'm civilian maintenance. You assumed I was a security risk because I know more than you expected. Maybe you should consider what other assumptions you might be making." The standoff stretched for several seconds, with Morrison clearly trying to decide whether to escalate further or back down. Around them, the SEALs watched in fascination as their commander was challenged by someone a third his size. Finally, Master Chief Kelly broke the tension. "Commander, permission to make a suggestion?" Morrison turned to look at the Master Chief, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "What is it, Master Chief?" "Instead of calling security, why don't we settle this definitively? If Miss Parker here claims to know weapons, let's see her prove it where it counts. On the range." The suggestion drew murmurs of approval from the crowd. A shooting test would settle questions about Madison's abilities once and for all. "What kind of test?" Morrison asked, his tactical mind already working through the possibilities. Kelly smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. "Long-range precision shooting. Standard SEAL sniper qualification. If she's really as good as she claims, she should be able to handle it. If not, we'll know she's been bluffing." Madison stood very still as the implications of Kelly's suggestion sank in. A formal shooting test would require her to demonstrate skills that could reveal far more about her background than she was prepared to share. But refusing would confirm Morrison's suspicions and likely result in the security investigation she was trying to avoid. "What are the parameters?" she asked quietly. "Standard course of fire," Kelly replied. 5 rounds at 800 meters, prone position, no wind calls. You need at least 4 hits in the target area to pass. 800 meters was a challenging distance even for experienced snipers. For someone claiming to be civilian maintenance, it should be impossible. Morrison grinned triumphantly. "Perfect, and when she fails spectacularly, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with." Madison looked from Morrison to Kelly, then out toward the range visible through the armory windows. 800 meters. She had made shots at more than 4 times that distance. But these people didn't know that. The question was whether she could afford to reveal the extent of her capabilities, or whether she should deliberately fail to maintain her cover. "When?" she asked. "Right now," Morrison said immediately. "No time to prepare, no time to make excuses. If you're as good as you pretend to be, you shouldn't need preparation." Madison nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable. I'll need the M24 I was working on and appropriate ammunition. M118 Special Ball, Kelly said, producing a small box of cartridges from a locked cabinet. Standard issue for precision work. As Madison accepted the ammunition, her fingers brushed against Kelly's hand, and the Master Chief felt calluses that had nothing to do with maintenance work. They were the hardened ridges of someone who had spent countless hours gripping rifle stocks, the kind of calluses that took years to develop and were impossible to fake. The group moved toward the range in a cluster, with Madison walking slightly apart from the others. Jake Torres found himself studying her movement, noting the way she automatically positioned herself where she could see all the exits, the way her eyes continuously scanned for potential threats. It was tactical behavior, ingrained to the point of being unconscious. The Coronado-based shooting range stretched out before them like a concrete amphitheater designed for the deadly arts. Multiple firing positions were carved into artificial berms, with electronic target systems that could be positioned at distances ranging from 50 meters to over a kilometer. The Pacific Ocean provided a natural backstop, its blue-gray waters stretching to the horizon under the morning sun. Master Chief Kelly activated the electronic systems, bringing online a target at exactly 800 meters. The circular target appeared as a small dot in the distance, barely visible to the naked eye. Even with magnified optics, hitting it consistently required exceptional skill and extensive training. Madison knelt at the designated firing position, adjusting the M24's bipod legs with practiced efficiency. She worked the bolt to chamber around, her movements economical and precise. Around her, the SEALs formed a semicircle, some openly skeptical, others genuinely curious about what was going to happen. 1 magazine, 5 rounds, Kelly announced, his voice carrying the formal tone of an official qualification. Targets will be scored electronically and results displayed on the monitor. Shooter, are you ready? Madison settled into her prone position, the rifle stock nestled against her shoulder with perfect consistency. She adjusted the scope's magnification and began her sight picture, taking her time despite the pressure of having 50 elite operators watching her every move. Through the scope, the target sprang into sharp focus. 800 meters, not particularly challenging by her standards, but far enough to reveal whether someone possessed genuine precision shooting skills or was simply pretending. The wind was calm, maybe 3 miles per hour from the southwest, not enough to significantly affect trajectory. If this moment is giving you absolute chills, share this video with someone who needs to see that true strength comes in unexpected packages. What's about to be revealed will change everything these SEALs thought they knew about their cleaning lady. Madison's breathing slowed, becoming deep and rhythmic. Her heart rate decreased as she entered the meditative state that all precision shooters learn to access. The world narrowed to the small circle of her scope, the crosshairs steady on the target center despite the fact that she was being watched by dozens of skeptical eyes. The first shot broke with perfect surprise, the result of steady rearward pressure that seemed to fire the rifle without conscious thought. Through the scope, Madison saw the impact, a clean hit in the 9-ring just outside perfect center. "Hit," Kelly called out, reading the electronic display. 9.2. Murmurs ran through the crowd. It was a good shot, better than many of the SEALs could achieve under pressure, but one shot could be luck. Madison cycled the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round. Her position remained rock steady, the rifle tracking naturally back to the target without apparent effort. The second shot followed within 30 seconds. "Hit, 9.7. Now the murmurs were taking on a different tone. 2 consecutive hits at 800 meters suggested skill rather than fortune. Several SEALs were checking their own scoped weapons, trying to spot the target that Madison was hitting with apparent ease. The third shot came after a longer pause as Madison waited for a subtle wind shift to settle. When the rifle fired, the electronic target system registered the impact immediately. "Hit, 10.0, perfect center." Commander Morrison stepped up to the electronic display, staring at the readout as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "This has to be a malfunction." "System's working fine, sir," the range technician replied. "That's a perfect shot at 800 meters." Madison chambered her 4th round, her breathing still controlled and rhythmic. Around her, the crowd had grown completely silent, watching in fascination as the maintenance worker they had been mocking demonstrated shooting skills that most of them would never achieve. The fourth shot was another perfect 10, the bullet striking within millimeters of the third shot's impact point. Madison was shooting a group that could be covered by a quarter, at a distance where most people couldn't even see the target clearly. 2 perfect 10s, Kelly announced, his voice betraying genuine admiration. 1 shot remaining. Madison cycled the bolt for the final time, settling back into her shooting position with the same calm precision she had shown throughout the string of fire. But this time, something was different. Instead of taking careful aim through the scope, she made a subtle adjustment to the rifle's position and removed her eye from the optics entirely. "What's she doing?" Torres whispered to Kelly. "I think she's about to show off," Kelly replied grimly. Madison fired the 5th shot using only the rifle's iron sights, the small metal posts and apertures that were considered backup aiming devices. Shooting accurately with iron sights at 800 meters was nearly impossible, requiring exceptional eyesight, perfect technique, and years of practice. The target system registered the final impact. Hit. 10.0. The range fell absolutely silent, except for the sound of waves against the distant shore. Madison had just fired a perfect qualification score, using iron sights for her final shot. A demonstration of skill that went far beyond anything a civilian maintenance worker should possess. She safed the rifle and stood slowly, her expression giving nothing away. But Jake Torres noticed something that made his blood run cold. Madison's hands were completely steady. No adrenaline tremor, no excitement, no indication that she had just accomplished something extraordinary. For her, shooting a perfect score at 800 meters appeared to be routine. "Holy cow," Rodriguez breathed, his earlier mockery completely forgotten. Commander Morrison stared at the electronic display showing 5 consecutive hits, 3 of them perfect scores. His face had gone pale, and he seemed to be struggling to process what he had just witnessed. "Impossible," he muttered. "Nobody shoots like that. Not without years of professional training." Madison was already cleaning the rifle, her movements methodical and careful. "Is the test concluded, sir?" Master Chief Kelly stepped forward, his weathered face showing a mixture of respect and concern. "Miss Parker, I've been in this business for 22 years. I've seen the best shooters in the world, Olympic competitors, SEAL snipers, Marine Corps legends. What you just did, that's not civilian marksmanship. That's professional-level precision shooting." Madison continued cleaning the M24, her attention apparently focused on removing every trace of carbon fouling from the bolt face. "I had good instruction." "From who?" Kelly pressed. "Where does someone learn to shoot like that?" For a moment, Madison's composure seemed to waver. Her hands paused in their cleaning motion, and something flickered across her face. Pain, perhaps, or loss. Then the moment passed, and her mask of calm competence slipped back into place. "That's not something I can discuss." The answer hung in the air like smoke, not "I don't want to discuss it" or "it's not relevant," but "I can't discuss it." The phrasing suggested classification levels and security restrictions that civilian maintenance workers didn't typically encounter. Morrison stepped forward, his earlier anger replaced by something approaching fear. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you directly. Are you currently, or have you ever been employed by any branch of the United States military or intelligence services?" Madison looked up from the rifle, meeting Morrison's gaze steadily. "No, sir. I have never been employed by any branch of the military." Again, the carefully precise wording. Torres found himself analyzing Madison's responses, noting what she said and what she didn't say. She had never been employed by the military, but what about other government agencies? During the aftermath processing, Madison accessed her personal trauma management resources, including advanced stress management techniques and specialized psychological support systems, originally developed for elite special operations personnel. The comprehensive mental health support network she maintained cost more per month than most people's mortgage payments, but provided the kind of evidence-based PTSD treatment and crisis intervention services that remained essential for managing the long-term psychological effects of classified operations and combat-related trauma. The sophistication of her mental health support system was something that Master Chief Kelly recognized immediately. He had worked with enough operators dealing with combat stress to know the difference between standard counseling services and the specialized care required for dealing with classified trauma. But it was Morrison who asked the question that was on everyone's mind. If you're not military and you're not intelligence, then what the hell are you? Madison stood slowly, slinging the rifle and facing the assembled SEALs. For a moment, she seemed to be weighing her options, calculating how much truth she could reveal without compromising whatever secrets she was protecting. "I'm exactly what my employment records say I am," she said finally. "A maintenance contractor trying to do her job." "Maintenance contractors don't shoot like that," Morrison replied flatly. "I don't care what your paperwork says. People with your skills don't just appear out of nowhere to clean weapons in a SEAL compound." "Don't they?" Madison asked quietly. "Where did you think people with these skills go when they're done using them professionally?" The question hit the crowd like a physical blow. Several SEALs exchanged glances, suddenly understanding the implications of what Madison was suggesting. If she possessed the shooting skills they had just witnessed, and if those skills were developed through professional use, then her presence at the base wasn't coincidence. It was refuge. Master Chief Kelly was the first to verbalize what they were all thinking. "You're retired." Madison didn't confirm or deny the statement, but her silence was answer enough. She began collecting her cleaning equipment, her movements once again those of a simple maintenance worker. But the facade no longer worked. Everyone in the room had seen behind the mask. "From what?" Morrison pressed. "What organization produces shooters who can do what you just did?" Madison paused in her packing, her hands stilling on the equipment cases. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent range, every word carried clearly. "The kind of organization that doesn't exist on paper, Commander. The kind that sends people to places that aren't on maps to do things that never happened." The admission sent a chill through the crowd. Jake Torres felt his stomach drop as the implications sank in. Madison wasn't just retired military. She was retired from something much more secretive, much more dangerous. Morrison stepped back involuntarily, his tactical mind already working through the ramifications. If Madison was former intelligence, former special operations, or worse, then his treatment of her could have consequences that extended far beyond the SEAL community. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot." Madison looked up at him, and for just a moment, Torres saw exhaustion in her eyes. Not physical tiredness, but the soul-deep weariness of someone carrying secrets too heavy for one person to bear. "Commander, all I wanted was to clean some weapons and finish my work shift. I never intended for any of this to happen." "But it did happen," Kelly said gently. "And now, we all have questions that need answers." Madison shouldered her equipment bag and looked around the circle of SEALs one more time. "Some questions are better left unasked, Master Chief. Some answers come with prices that nobody wants to pay." She started walking toward the range exit, but Morrison called after her. "Miss Parker, we're not done here." Madison stopped but didn't turn around. "Yes, sir, we are. You wanted to know if I could handle your weapons. I've demonstrated that I can. You wanted to know if I was a security risk. I've shown you that I'm not. Anything beyond that is above your clearance level." The casual mention of clearance levels from someone who supposedly didn't have them was the final piece of the puzzle for several of the veterans in the crowd. They understood now that they were dealing with someone whose background was not only classified, but classified at levels that even SEAL commanders couldn't access. "Wait," Torres called out, surprising himself with his boldness. "Before you go, who trained you? Someone had to teach you to shoot like that." Madison finally turned back toward the group, and Torres saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. It wasn't sadness exactly, but a profound sense of loss that seemed to encompass more than just memories of training. "He was the best there ever was," she said simply, "and he's been dead for 3 years. With that, Madison Parker walked out of the range, leaving 50 elite Navy SEALs staring after her in stunned silence. The maintenance worker, who had walked into their armory that morning, was gone, replaced by the mysterious figure of someone whose true identity remained hidden behind layers of classification and sorrow. But, as Torres would discover in the coming days, Madison's story was far from over, and the secrets she was carrying would soon come to light in ways that would change everything. Not just for the SEALs who had witnessed her impossible demonstration of skill, but for Madison herself, who was about to discover that some chapters of life can never truly be closed. The next story features an even more shocking military revelation: a janitor who turns out to be a Medal of Honor recipient. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss these incredible tales of hidden heroes. But first, we need to see what happens when Madison's true identity begins to unravel, and the past she's been running from finally catches up with her. The armory remained silent for nearly a full minute after Madison Parker disappeared through the exit. 50 elite Navy SEALs stood frozen in place, each processing what they had just witnessed in their own way. The electronic target display continued showing the impossible results. 5 consecutive hits at 800 meters, 3 of them perfect 10s, with the final shot accomplished using only iron sights. Commander Morrison was the first to move, walking slowly to the display terminal and staring at the numbers as if they might change if he looked hard enough. His face had lost all traces of its earlier arrogance, replaced by the pale complexion of someone who was beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. "Master Chief," Morrison said quietly, his voice lacking its usual commanding presence. "In your professional opinion, what did we just witness?" Master Chief Kelly was examining the spent brass casings that Madison had left on the firing line, rolling them between his fingers with the practiced touch of someone who understood the subtle signs that separated amateur shooting from professional marksmanship. "Sir, those weren't lucky shots," Kelly replied, his weathered face grave. "The consistency of her shooting position, the way she controlled her breathing, the natural point of aim, that's muscle memory developed over thousands of rounds under expert instruction. And the iron sight shot at the end..." He paused, shaking his head. "I've only seen 3 people in my entire career who could make that shot. 2 of them are dead, and the third runs a sniper school at Quantico." Lieutenant Jake Torres had been unusually quiet since Madison's departure, his tactical mind working through the implications of everything they had observed. "Master Chief, when she said her instructor had been dead for 3 years, do you think she meant—" "I think she meant exactly what she said," Kelly interrupted grimly. "Someone trained her to that level, someone who knew what they were doing, and now that someone is gone, which might explain why she's here cleaning weapons instead of using them professionally." Petty Officer Rodriguez, who had been one of Madison's harshest critics earlier, was staring at the target display with something approaching shock. "You don't think she's actually what?" Morrison demanded. "One of them. You know, the ghosts, the ones who do the jobs that never happened in the places that don't exist." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. In the special operations community, everyone knew stories about the shadow operators, the men and women who worked for organizations with no names, conducting missions that would never appear in any official record. They were legends and myths, except when they turned out to be very real. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the possible truth of Rodriguez's speculation. If Madison Parker was former intelligence, former black ops, or something even more classified, then his treatment of her could have consequences that extended far beyond his own career. "We need to find out who she really is," Morrison said, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. "Kelly, get on the secure terminal and run her through every database we can access. Full background check, employment history, everything." "Sir," Torres interjected, "if she's really who we think she might be, her records could be sealed at levels we can't reach." "Then we'll reach higher," Morrison replied grimly. "I'm not letting this go until I know exactly what we're dealing with." The secure communications center at Coronado Naval Base was a windowless room filled with encrypted terminals and satellite uplinks that connected the facility to intelligence networks around the world. Master Chief Kelly had spent enough time in similar rooms to know that some searches produced results immediately, while others disappeared into classification levels that even senior military personnel couldn't access. Madison Parker's background check fell into the second category. The initial search returned standard employment records, maintenance contractor, hired 8 months earlier, clean security clearance, no criminal history. But when Kelly attempted to access deeper records, particularly anything related to her background prior to arriving at Coronado, the system returned responses that made his blood run cold. Access denied, classification level insufficient. Records sealed by executive order. Contact National Security Advisor for information release. Kelly had been conducting security searches for over 2 decades, and he had never seen a civilian contractor whose records were protected at levels that required presidential authorization to access. Whatever Madison Parker had been before becoming a maintenance worker, It was significant enough that multiple federal agencies wanted her past to remain buried. But it was the final search result that confirmed Kelly's worst fears. When he entered Madison's biometric data into the classified personnel database, the system returned a single line of text that made his hands shake. Subject deceased, KIA Afghanistan, 2021. No further information available. According to official records, Madison Parker had been killed in action 3 years ago in Afghanistan, which meant that either the records were wrong or the woman cleaning weapons in their armory was someone else entirely, someone using the identity of a dead operative. Kelly immediately contacted Commander Morrison, requesting an emergency meeting in the secure conference room. When Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by Torres and several other senior team members, Kelly's expression told them everything they needed to know. "We have a problem," Kelly said without preamble. "A very big problem." He activated the secure display terminal and showed them the search results. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. "She's supposed to be dead," Morrison said slowly. "Officially killed in action 3 years ago. Which means either the records are wrong or we've been dealing with someone who's been living under a false identity," Kelly replied. "And given the classification levels protecting her information, I'm betting it's not an administrative error." Torres studied the display, his mind racing through possibilities. What if she faked her death? What if something went wrong on her last mission and she needed to disappear? Or, Morrison said grimly, what if her entire team was killed and she's the only survivor of something that was supposed to remain secret? Before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened and Base Commander Captain William Anderson entered. Anderson was a 28-year Navy veteran whose weathered face and steel gray hair spoke to decades of dealing with classified situations and sensitive personnel issues. "Gentlemen," Anderson said, his voice carrying the weight of command authority, "we need to talk about your maintenance contractor." The statement confirmed everyone's worst fears. If the base commander was personally involved, then Madison's situation had already escalated beyond the SEAL team level. Anderson activated another terminal and entered a series of clearance codes that were several levels above anything the SEAL team had access to. The display that appeared made everyone in the room step back involuntarily. Madison Parker's true file appeared on screen, not the sanitized maintenance records they had seen before, but her actual operational history. And what they saw changed everything. "Angel of Death," Anderson read from the display. "CIA Special Activities Division. 47 confirmed kills over 6 years of operations in Afghanistan, Syria, and other locations that remain classified. World record holder for longest confirmed sniper kill at 3,347 meters. Sole survivor of Operation Nightfall, which resulted in the deaths of her entire team." The room was completely silent as the magnitude of Madison's true identity sank in. They hadn't been dealing with a maintenance contractor with mysterious skills. They had been confronting one of the most lethal operators in the history of American intelligence services. "She retired after her team was killed," Anderson continued, his voice heavy with the weight of classified tragedy. "Severe PTSD, survivor's guilt, and a desire to disappear completely from the operational world. The CIA arranged a new identity and helped her transition to civilian life." Morrison felt sick as he realized what had happened. "We accused her of being a security risk. We threatened to call security on her. We treated her like a potential threat instead of a decorated veteran who sacrificed everything for her country," Anderson finished. "Yes, Commander, that's exactly what you did." The captain's words hit Morrison like physical blows. In his arrogance and prejudice, he had not only insulted one of America's most accomplished warriors, but had potentially triggered trauma responses in someone dealing with severe PTSD. "Sir," Torres said quietly, "what do we do now?" Anderson was quiet for a long moment, studying the classified file with the expression of someone who had seen too many similar tragedies. "Now, gentlemen, you have an opportunity to do the right thing. Angel of Death, Madison Parker, has been trying to build a quiet life away from the violence that defined her career. She chose to work in maintenance because she wanted to help keep weapons functional without having to use them against human targets." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "Your team's actions today forced her to reveal capabilities she's been trying to forget. You've potentially undone months of psychological healing and thrown her back into a mindset she's been trying to escape. The weight of collective guilt settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. These were warriors who understood sacrifice and service, and they were beginning to comprehend that they had attacked someone whose sacrifices exceeded their own. "What can we do to make this right?" Morrison asked, his voice subdued. "That depends," Anderson replied, "on what Madison decides to do next. Her cover is blown now. Her quiet life is over. She'll either have to disappear again or—" He trailed off, leaving the alternative unspoken. "Or what?" Kelly asked. "Or she might decide that running isn't worth the effort anymore," Anderson said grimly. "And for someone with her skill set and psychological profile, that could be very dangerous for everyone involved." The next several hours passed in tense uncertainty as base security attempted to locate Madison. She had left the range and disappeared completely, neither returning to her quarters nor reporting to her maintenance supervisor. Her vehicle remained in the parking lot, but she seemed to have vanished without a trace. It wasn't until 1800 hours that evening that she was finally spotted by a Marine sentry who noticed someone on the observation deck of the base's lighthouse, a restricted area that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The sentry reported that the figure was sitting motionless, staring out at the water, and had been there for several hours. Commander Morrison made the decision to approach her personally, despite advice from base security to wait for professional counselors to arrive. He felt responsible for triggering the situation and believed he owed Madison a personal apology. The lighthouse observation deck was accessed by a narrow stairway that wound up through the interior of the historic structure. Morrison climbed slowly, his footsteps echoing in the confined space, giving Madison plenty of warning of his approach. When he emerged onto the deck, she was exactly where the sentry had reported, sitting on the concrete ledge, her legs dangling over the side, staring out at the endless expanse of ocean. "Miss Parker," Morrison said carefully, staying several feet away to avoid appearing threatening. "May I join you?" Madison didn't turn around, but she nodded slightly. Morrison moved to the ledge beside her, maintaining respectful distance while close enough to speak normally. "I owe you an apology," Morrison began, his voice lacking its usual commanding presence. "Actually, I owe you several apologies. For questioning your presence in our armory, for doubting your abilities, for threatening to call security, and for treating you with disrespect." Madison remained silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning its descent toward the water. "I also owe you an explanation," Morrison continued. "Not an excuse, because there isn't one that justifies my behavior, but an explanation for why I reacted the way I did." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "In this business, we're trained to be suspicious of anomalies. Someone who doesn't fit expected parameters triggers our defensive instincts. When you demonstrated knowledge and skills that exceeded what your cover story suggested, I interpreted that as a threat rather than recognizing it as the result of exceptional training and experience." Madison finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "Your instincts weren't wrong, Commander. I am an anomaly. I don't belong in your world anymore, but I don't really belong in the civilian world either." "Where do you belong?" Morrison asked gently. Madison was quiet for a long moment, watching seagulls wheel and dive over the waves below. "I used to belong with my team, 6 of us working together, watching each other's backs. We were family in every way that mattered." Her voice caught slightly, and Morrison realized he was hearing her discuss the team that had been killed 3 years earlier. "They were all I had," Madison continued, "and when they died, I lost more than just my colleagues. I lost my purpose, my identity, my reason for existing. The person I used to be died with them in that ambush." Morrison felt a chill as he recognized the psychological profile Anderson had warned him about. Madison wasn't just dealing with survivors' guilt. She was dealing with the complete dissolution of everything that had defined her identity. "But you survived," Morrison said carefully, "and survival has to count for something." "Does it?" Madison asked, finally turning to look at him. "I've spent 3 years trying to convince myself that surviving was worthwhile, that building a quiet life, helping maintain weapons instead of using them, was some kind of meaningful existence." She gestured toward the base below them. "Today, your team forced me back into being the angel of death. And you know what I realized? That person never really went away. She was just hiding, waiting for someone to call her out." Morrison felt a growing sense of alarm as he realized the direction Madison's thoughts were heading. "Miss Parker, Madison, what happened today doesn't change who you choose to be going forward." Madison stood up from the ledge, her movement smooth and controlled despite the height and the potential danger. "Doesn't it? Your team knows who I really am now. Base security knows. Soon everyone will know. My cover is blown, my quiet life is over, and I'm back to being what I was trained to be." "You have choices," Morrison insisted, standing as well but careful not to make any sudden movements. "You can rebuild, start over somewhere else, find a new kind of peace." "Can I?" Madison asked, and there was something in her voice that made Morrison's tactical instincts scream warnings. "Or is this just the universe telling me that some people don't get to retire from what they really are?" Before Morrison could respond, his radio crackled with an emergency transmission. "All units, we have an unscheduled helicopter approaching the base. Military aircraft, no flight plan, requesting immediate landing and priority handling for a passenger." Morrison keyed his radio. "Control, this is Morrison. What kind of passenger?" "Sir, the helicopter is requesting permission to transport a CIA liaison officer who says he needs to speak with Angel of Death immediately. He says it's a matter of national security." Madison and Morrison stared at each other, both understanding the implications immediately. Madison's past wasn't just catching up with her, it was arriving via military helicopter with official authority behind it. "They found me," Madison said quietly. "I should have known I couldn't stay hidden forever." The helicopter appeared on the horizon moments later, a sleek military transport that approached the base with the purposeful directness of an official mission. As it circled for landing, Madison made a decision that would change everything. "Commander, I need you to do something for me," she said, her voice taking on the crisp authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in life-and-death situations. "What do you need?" Madison reached into her pocket and withdrew a small envelope, sealed and unmarked. "If something happens to me, if I don't come back from whatever this is, I need you to mail this letter. The address is inside." Morrison accepted the envelope, noting the weight and the careful way Madison handled it. "What's in it?" "The truth," Madison replied simply. "About what happened to my team, about why I'm really here, and about what I've learned in the 3 years since I supposedly died." The helicopter touched down on the base landing pad, its rotors creating a whirlwind of dust and noise. Through the windows, they could see figures in dark suits preparing to disembark. "Madison," Morrison said urgently, "you don't have to go with them. You've served your country enough. You've given enough." Madison looked at him with something that might have been gratitude or might have been sadness. "Commander, some people never really leave the battlefield. They just change positions." She started walking toward the lighthouse stairs, then paused and looked back. "And Commander, take care of your team. They're good people, even when they make mistakes. Don't let what happened today define them." Morrison watched her descend the stairs, knowing that he was witnessing the end of Madison Parker, the maintenance worker, and the return of something much more dangerous. He looked down at the envelope in his hands, feeling its weight like a stone. By the time Morrison reached the base landing pad, Madison was already walking toward the helicopter. The CIA liaison officer who emerged to meet her was a thin man in his 50s, wearing the kind of nondescript suit that screamed federal authority. Their conversation was brief and conducted in voices too low for anyone else to hear. As Madison approached the helicopter, she turned back toward the base one final time. Her gaze found Morrison standing among the group of SEALs who had gathered to witness her departure. Even at that distance, he could see her nod, a small gesture of acknowledgement that somehow conveyed both forgiveness and farewell. Then Angel of Death climbed into the helicopter and disappeared into the darkening sky, leaving behind only questions and the lingering sense that something significant had ended while something else was beginning. Morrison stood holding her letter as the aircraft became a distant speck over the Pacific Ocean. Around him, his team watched in silence, each processing their own thoughts about what they had witnessed and participated in. "Master Chief," Morrison said finally, "I want a complete after-action report on today's events, and I want recommendations for how we can prevent this kind of mistake from happening again." "Aye, sir," Kelly replied. "But Commander, what do you think that letter contains?" Morrison looked down at the envelope, noting for the first time that it wasn't addressed to a person, but to an organization, one whose name he recognized from classified briefings about oversight of intelligence operations. "I think," Morrison said slowly, "it contains the kind of truth that someone thought was worth dying to protect." 3 weeks later, Morrison received news that made him understand the full scope of what Madison Parker had been carrying. The CIA liaison officer who had collected her from Coronado had been found dead in his hotel room in Washington, D.C., apparently from a heart attack. The official investigation concluded that he had died of natural causes, but the timing struck Morrison as suspiciously convenient. Madison vanished completely. No records, no trace, as if Angel of Death had returned to the shadows. Her letter revealed the truth. Operation Nightfall had been betrayed from within. Her team's deaths weren't random. They were silenced to protect traitors at the highest levels. Her disappearance wasn't rescue. It was elimination. 6 months later, Morrison received an encrypted message. "The truth survives even when its carriers don't. The angel may be gone, but death never really retires." Morrison kept the message, understanding now that Madison had hidden among maintenance equipment to protect explosive secrets. Official records still listed her as killed in Afghanistan, but he knew better. Angel of Death had simply learned to hunt different prey in different skies. Some angels, Morrison realized, were too dangerous for heaven and too necessary for Earth to let them rest.